The Law Reform Commission and partners a few days back commenced a nationwide consultation in Kenema, Bo, McKinney, and of course Freetown to seek the views of stakeholders in formulating the content of a proposed bill that will replace the Police Act of 1964. This act has been in existence for some 60 years, and it's now old and out of sync with the modern times. The proposed law will see, of course, protect the liberty of citizens, protect police officers in the execution of their duties, provide the police with, of course, modern methods and techniques in investigating white-collar crimes, prescribe stringent punishment for errant police officers, among other things. We're still in the studios this morning to help us discuss these developments. We have been joined by Andrew Johnson, who is of course a lawyer, and he's the Director of Research at the Law Reform Commission, and also ACP Brahima Kamara, who is the media head for the Silent Police. It's been a pleasure having you both here in the studio this morning. It's been a pleasure. Good morning.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you, Sierra Leoneans. And good morning, Sierra Leoneans too.
Good morning. 1964, it's been 60 years. And if it were a person, it were an individual, he would have joined the bandwagon of those who are considered aged, a very old person. Is it timely to see a review? Or in other words, are we expecting a holistic review or just in part of this 1965 Act? I start off with you.
Well, Sierra Leoneans, we must see, let me start by first of all declaring our mandate and why we think we have to review the Police Act.
Yes, sir.
Basically, the Law Reform Commission, set up by the Law Reform Commissions Act of 1994, as repealed and amended by the Repeals and Modifications Act of 1996, gave the Commission a very broad mandate to look into all the laws of Sierra Leone and see areas where they could review, where they could amend, where they could consolidate, that is, bring them together, different laws, because this particular law will be scattered in different legislations, where they could consolidate, and in areas where there is no law, to develop new laws. So in pursuance to that mandate, which we think is very important, because the laws of Sierra Leone are inexhaustible. You cannot exhaust the laws of Sierra Leone, because we have laws dated as far as 1381, like for instance the Forcible Entry Act is dated as far as 1381, and you have what they call the recaptive clause, which says that all laws in Sierra Leone, that all laws in UK of general application as of the 1st January 1980 automatically forms part of the laws of Sierra Leone. And imagine all the laws that may have been passed in England all these years before 1st January 1980, we cannot even fathom the extent of the laws. So we have a very wide mandate. With the Police Act, as you rightly said, it's one of those acts. The Law Reform Commission discovered that one of the reasons why the police is not where it is supposed to be is because the primary legislation that guides and regulates the police is out of date. It's not only out of date, it is out of sync with the Constitution itself, which is the ground norm. The 1991 Constitution is very clear on several aspects. I'll give you an example. The composition of the Police Council under the 1991 Constitution is at variance completely different from the composition of the Police Council under the 1964 Act. You see? So, and the 1964 Act is deficient in several human rights provisions. The time they enacted the Police Act, those were the times of public order, when there were a lot of public order. Public order was the order of the day. But now human rights is the order of the day. And we see that the Police Act lacks several provisions that will say will enhance human rights. So among the things we're thinking about, well, the first thing is from our consultative conference, we know that a lot of people want it to be changed from a police force to a police service, as Ghana has done and some other countries. They say because the mindset of it being a force leads to police officers always thinking that they must quell things by force. They must always do things forcefully. But if it's a service, it will create a mindset that they are serving the rest of the population. So that is one important factor, one important change we're thinking of. Then another important clause we're also thinking about, Section 20 of the Constitution prohibits torture and inhuman treatment of any kind. In fact, it is the only human rights provision in the Constitution that has no exception. When you talk about the right to life, you could be killed by a lawful order if they declare you to death, or if you are partaking in a riot or a mutiny, you could be killed. Freedom of expression could be limited. Freedom of movements could be limited. But when it comes to torture, there is no limitation. So we deemed it fit, and in fact, that is a novelty because it's not in other police legislation in Ghana, Kenya, South Africa. So that is a novelty to us. We want to make torture a crime punishable by up to 7 years or more imprisonment. Meaning, if a police officer deliberately tortures a criminal, that person could sue that police officer either personally or generally, as you can sue the inspector general for compensation in that regard. So that is one major area we want to bring when you talk about human rights provisions. And it's a balance. In this reform, we're thinking of two important balances. One, to balance the need for security. We all know we all want to be secure. We are happy to see police around securing us. But again, we want to balance it against our rights. So it's a matter of security versus rights. That is why in this reform, we do not only want to just give rights to citizens without thinking about the welfare of police officers. One important aspect we're thinking of the welfare of police officers, well, there are several, but I'll name one for now. Now, when people lose their mobile phones and you go to the police, try to track them down, if the police officer writes to the telecommunications company that they want this call log, some of them cooperate, some do not cooperate. But when you look, there is no law forcing them to cooperate, so they can voluntarily cooperate. And except the only recourse the police has is to go to the High Court to get an order for them to cooperate, which is a bit cumbersome, and by then probably the culprit will have escaped. So now we want it to be in the act that police officer, the inspector general himself, he can delegate it to anybody, can request for call logs from people as long as they're investigating someone. Then, when it comes to welfare of the police also, we see normally snippets of videos where police officers, whether it's in Sierra Leone or elsewhere, are being beaten by civilians. They will try to arrest an Okada or a keke driver, and then the police officer will be manhandled by people, and there will be onlookers laughing, videoing, and ridiculing the force. We do not think that is proper, and as a result, we want to include a section where it should be mandatory for a police officer. If a police officer calls you an able-bodied man, if he's trying to execute an arrest, and he calls you an able-bodied man, and you have no physical ailments or you have no reason not to heed his command, it will be an offense not to come to his aid. That is something we're also thinking of. We're also thinking about bringing a lot of gender-friendly conditions. Okay. Whereas when you think about gender-friendly conditions that favor women generally, you see. So human rights provisions, non-discriminatory provisions again, because when you look, discrimination is the order of the day. It's so easy to discriminate against people on the basis of sex, on the basis of tribe, on the basis of race, whereas the Constitution is very clear: discrimination should not be allowed. So there has to be a clause in the new Police Act that will prohibit discrimination of any type, meaning if somebody is handicapped, he applies to be a police officer. Yes, he will be physically challenged, but there are areas you can still use him. He could still sit, he could still take reports. And that doesn't necessarily mean that because he has some disability, he cannot perform, you know. So we're thinking of all that. But basically, as you asked, we're thinking of a complete overhaul, a replacement, a complete repeal and replacement of this 1964 Police Act, because it is no longer fit for purpose. It's not in sync with the Constitution, and even we recall in 1998 when the late His Excellency Tijan Kaba appointed Kit Bidul as the police officer. Between 1998 and 2002, there were a lot of reforms that were done. Quite a lot of reforms that were done, but those reforms,
many of the issues
we are not reflected.
Many of the issues you've highlighted,
yes.
It's some other acts, some other parts of our laws cater to address some of those things. The excess force of the police, human rights. Not long ago we had the Deputy Chair from Human Rights Commission talking about the fines levied on the army and the Sierra Leone police for excessive force used against citizens. So it tells you there's a law there. We have GWI, which speaks to gender equality and discrimination. But what comes to mind is the conversation we've had many times about responsibility, taking responsibility. For so long, the police itself has gone without checks and balances. You find overzealous police officers who have had even the gumption to attack journalists who are filming. You're doing your job, a journalist is doing their job. It leads us to accountability, not necessarily lack of laws in other acts or clauses that speak to holding them accountable for their work they do, checks and balances. It's not there.
Yeah, certainly. That is why one area we're recommending is continuous training for policemen and for them to take responsibility individually, because if you know, it's under the police code of conduct. Yes, you can heed orders from above. And I mean orders from above, I don't mean orders, political orders from above, as learned friend corrected us in the province. It does not mean the political interference, it just means orders from a superior, your immediate superior, you know.
And the immediate superior does also have his or her own orders from above, mostly tied to politics. Let's get to the realities of things and focus on the realities of what things are. Yes. Just because you got the order from your superior doesn't mean that superior did not get that order through politics.
Absolutely, I agree with you, but that is not how it's supposed to be. You see, as you rightly said, we have the laws. It's about implementing the laws, because we have the police council, and this is something a lot of people in our consultations with the public frowned against. The composition of the police council is headed by the vice president, and you have the Minister of Internal Affairs as the secretary, you have the IG and the DIG, and you have the bar association.
The main question is, review or not, how would things change, as in a tangible change, when we see videos of police executing arrests? In the arrest process, they're violating the rights of that person who's being arrested, because the law says innocent until proven guilty. You're making your arrest, you're assaulting the person in the process of your arrest, you're doing this, you're doing that. Even with the review, how would anything change?
Yes, you know, the rest of the world, especially Europe, when you look at their history, changes happen through the courts to a large extent. So now, if you have a specific provision against torture in the Police Act, you'll see lawyers directly suing that particular. Now, we live in a social media world. If a policeman handles somebody, he's on his own. You can sue him directly as a person, and when you sue him as a person, the law could take its course. He could be dismissed, because the police discipline regulation 2001 is very clear. If you've been convicted at the by the general court, you will also lose your job. So we hope, this is what we hope, that with these laws, you know, people will try to test them in the courts, and when they're tested in the court, the results will stand the test of time.
Johnson, Just as Fabian mentioned, there are a number of laws that looks at the operations and activities of the police. You mentioned arrest, which is of course critically, it's well seated in the Criminal Procedure Act that tells you how arrest is done by police or even by an individual. There are many laws that talks on the operations and activities of the police. But similarly so, the police has come under scrutiny by the public as it relates to the manner at which police execute their operations and activities. Errant policing is more like the order of the day. And even the issues of bail, corruption, and many more. How do you think SAME will adequately capture most of these issues that keeps affecting the operations of policing in the country?
Well, it starts with us, the citizens. I know it's a process, but it starts with us, the citizens, stamping or insisting for our rights, you know. But most of public education, as we're doing now, and all the rest, so people know that they should not be tortured. If you're tortured, there's marks on your body, you know, it's very clear that you'll be that you are tortured. You take a lawyer, or you could go to one of these pro bono institutions, legal pro bono institutions that do matters freely, and at the same time they will take those matters for you and bring the police to book.
But the police itself that executes law and order many times have come to disrespect other professions and institutions. A case in point, when popular rapper LAJ was arrested, he was arrested with dreadlocks. Later on, his hair was shaved. And we saw his lawyers come public to say that they were even denying them access to see their client. The same police force, we had the Human Rights Deputy Commissioner here speaking about how when they had their sessions to do the investigation, the military fully participated, but they can't say the same for the Sierra Leone police. They did not participate fully in that investigation process of the Human Rights Commission of Sierra Leone going through the excessive force checks and balances. So the police itself requests, demands respect by the public, but they themselves have not always been seen respecting the public and other professions. How do you demand what you don't give?
Well,
I would let him as well answer to that.
Well, I just wanted to go down that route. I can only answer as to the legal situation, the legal provisions in place. When it comes to the practical situations, I can only ask my learned friend.
Luckily, he speaks for the police.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you demand what you don't give? Respect is earned. It's reciprocal.
The fact remains, like you said, you cannot earn what you have not worked for, or what we normally say in law, that could not have bet.
No one can give what you
do not have. But the fact remains, I think we have been doing our best. Maybe there were some challenges along the line, but the fact remains we have been cooperating with them, and I know they've been speaking to me.
If what the police has been giving is their best, then it's worrisome for the country. That's the best capacity of the police, what we've seen? That's the best?
In terms of what?
No, you said you've been giving your best.
No, we are talking about Human Rights Commission. We're not cooperating with Human Rights Commission. I said we have been doing our best to cooperate with them. They've been coming to my offices and to our offices, to me in particular, and I've been providing the required information they need. But maybe along the line, as they move up country, they might have one or two problems simply because, you know, we sometimes have operations. You might need me here today, but there are operations. I cannot leave that operation to go and attend to you. Because if anything goes wrong, they are going to blame the police. So if there are one or two problems, they cannot generalize to say you have not been cooperating with them.
ACP,
yeah.
You've listened keenly, and I suppose you're also part of the process. I mean, they give
I'm a member of the subcommittee.
I know, they give you process. Will this one usher in a better policing for the nation?
That is the expectation. This is why we reform laws. This is why we review laws, because you must have seen some cracks. You must have seen some lacunas, and then you now say, let us do all we could to resolve those issues. Like the issues he highlighted, the aspect of torture, it was not specifically mentioned or addressed in the Police Act of 1964. And there were various other areas that were not mentioned, but we've now taken steps to ensure that we resolve those issues by making provisions for them. We mentioned the police act, how do you call it, the police council. The composition was different. We even mentioned the Inspector General. How do you remove the Inspector General? If you look at the Police Act, it is not there. Who do you appoint as Inspector General? What you consider, it is not there. There were not even provisions for the Deputy Inspector General. So it was like just there to be sent or moved around by whoever is top of the police hierarchy. But we've made provision for the Deputy Inspector General, specific provisions for the Deputy Inspector General, and so on and so forth. So we are hoping, and the expectation there is at the end of the day, we're going to have something positive from this one, because you cannot have something to refer to. Even the lawyers will have something to refer to say, you've done this, A, B, and C, and because you've done this, it has gone against the current act, and then we are going to sue you.
You've already mentioned SIM, and I think even Johnson also pointed out to SIM, one of which you mentioned is that of torture. It is in the ground norm of the land, which is the Constitution, but the police over time has been defined, to follow laws within the Constitution. Why was that the case? The fact remains we are Sierra Leoneans, and some of us opted to join the police. But we actually didn't come from the same parents, and equally so we didn't come from the same environment. But we were provided the same training at the police training school. We came out. But normally they say habit is a kind of smoke. You cannot continue. Some people along the line, they cross the line. And several times what we do when they cross the line, we made them to account. This is why we have the Complaint, Discipline and Internal Investigations Department. Majority of them had been investigated, and when they were dismissed, we now take them to the open court. So we do not have, say, what we call a kind of covering for people who do bad policing. Otherwise, there was no need for us to dismiss certain people. Almost every month, almost every year, we put out the number of police officers we had dismissed from the police force. And some are on account of the issues you are mentioning. So we are saying, let us have it now straightforwardly in the new act that if you do A, B, and C, you are not only going to be dismissed from the police, but somebody out there has the right to even take action against you for compensation. Or you can take action against the entire institution itself, as the case may be. So this is why we are saying the expectation at the end of it all, we want to have a refined police force. And that police force that will become a police service. Service-oriented, serve the people, instead of you becoming masters over the people. Over the time, we've had conversation with many police officers, as journalists, including yourself.
Yes.
Many police officers on issues relating to Sierra Leone having an independent Sierra Leone police, rather than one that is political. Will this act speak to SIM? Independent police in Sierra Leone, rather than political police in Sierra Leone. In other words, a police that works specifically for the people, rather than one that works generally for government that is.
As far as I know, except maybe you have a own way of thinking, but as far as I know, we have an independent police, and that police is working for the people, because the provisions of the law, especially with regards to the functions of the police, whether it is 1996 or 2008, the functions we have been performing are the same functions we are performing. But
yet that same police force has been used repeatedly by politicians for political assignments that do not necessarily have to be in public interest. If you need examples, we can highlight some
many
of them
examples.
for you.
So let me allow you to zero in.
Okay.
In fairness, then this is just the truth, and this is something we got from the feedback from the provincial consultative meetings. Most people have crying, I will not say even vying, for the complete independence of the police, but under the Constitution, it is direct, it is not possible. And when you look,
so?
Section 156 of the Constitution talks about the composition of the police council. The police council exercises supervisory policy control over the police force. And Section 156 is an entrenched clause it is entrenched by Section 108 of the Constitution. With entrenched clauses, you cannot just go to Parliament and change them. You need a national referendum where individual people will vote. And after that referendum, you need 2/3 of Parliament. So it is almost impossible most times to change entrenched clauses. So, and that composition places the vice president as the head of the police.
Someone has to be in charge somewhere. But that does not necessarily make the police switch from working for the people, but now working against the people for the politicians.
I agree with you, I agree with you, but that is the concern, because a lot of people will say, well, if the vice president is head of the police council, you know, the vice president is a political figure. There is no way the police can be completely independent. That is the view of a lot of people. So for now, even in our review, we may want to change it, but we cannot, because you cannot have a law contradicting the Constitution. Section 171(15) of the Constitution says, any act or policy or law whatsoever that contravenes the Constitution is null and void to the extent of such contradiction. So we cannot change it. It has to remain as it is, unless we push for a constitutional review.
Is this really about the picture you painted, or about integrity questioned for perhaps the leadership of the Sierra Leone police? Because just, for example, having the vice president heading the police does not mean the police should be taking orders again that are not in the good of the public, but in good of politicians.
Well, I bring you again to Section 153 of the Constitution, which says the president can hire and fire the Inspector General at any time. So let's be frank, we are humans, you know. As much as I want to do the best, but if I know I could be hired and fired at any time by the president, it's easy to dance to the tune of who pays the piper calls the
Johnson,
tune.
it's not always the
I know it's a matter of integrity.
When you say politics, it's beyond just even the presidency. It's even to people who are politically exposed persons who are connected to as relatives, friends, or people around politicians, or even party members who are used. Let's use one case in question. The Bar Association. They had their issues. They were going to New Brookfields Hotel to do whatever they were doing. There was the Sierra Leone police put in the middle of it, prohibiting a body from sitting on a meeting. On whose orders? On whose authority? So to say exposed, politically exposed, it's not necessarily just the president or vice president or even ministers. People as well who feel that they have power or have connection to the presidency. We see people who feel like because they're relatives or friends of people who belong to political parties would use the police against ordinary citizens, even for minor disagreements.
Well, yes, I agree. Well, that's why it all starts by trying to change the law. You know, if we change the law, now, again, another aspect of our review, which is very important, is to like the police, right now the police operates on this police partnership board where they interface with community. It's very helpful. That is the vogue in Ghana, Nigeria, lots of Kenya, lots of other countries, even in UK, because it makes the police closer. But we don't have it here, because the 1964 Act did not contemplate that. So we are thinking of bringing it into law, because if it's not into law, one IG might wake up in the morning and say, no, I don't like police partnership board. So there are certain good practices of the police which we will want to be in the Act. Another one which may sound controversial for some people, but it's something we thought about, is this vehicular ban on election day. We know that over the last 3 or 4 elections, the police have attempted to ban vehicular movement on election day. A couple of years back, well, the last election, a colleague of mine, Augustus Soisembe Mara, he rode his vehicle around and he was arrested. He took up the services of prominent lawyer, Mr. Yada Williams, and associates, and they challenged the matter in the Supreme Court, whether the police had the right to ban vehicles or not. And I tell you what, the Supreme Court was very clear. They ruled that that should not be the case, because the only time the police can act is when there is a law allowing them to do that. So what we've thought of and this is one thing we're throwing to the public, we want to see their views. Whether we can now put it in the act that the Inspector General, in consultation with the head of NEC and the Political Parties Regulatory Commission, can consider restriction of vehicles either in parts or whole of the country if there's a riot or if things are going haywire. We're thinking of putting it now in this police act. So, you know, these are recommendations. They are not carved in stone. If the people say no, we'll remove it. If the people say yes, we'll include it. But these are just some of the recommendations. Because sometimes what the police, another thing is these checkpoints, which we see at night. If we search the law, nothing gives the police the right to individually search people without warrants, search their pockets, search their bags without warrants. But in fairness, so we're all happy that they're doing some things like this because it's for our good, so that thieves do not parade at night. So we're thinking of including that in the act, but it should be at a higher rank. Perhaps those checkpoints could be set up by a very higher rank police officer rather than just by a junior of police officers. So we're thinking of just ways to make the police a better force. A lot of human rights provisions also will be included.
It's very clear that from both speakers that we still have fine laws in the country that do point at the operations of the silent police. Earlier on you mentioned you know, submissions as to the need to transform the police from the manner at which it is to that of police service, just as now we have correctional service. Before this time it was prisons, which sounds otherwise. But again, these reforms, are we expecting a situation wherein the reforms will then reposition the police, the silent police, from it just being a force of good to it being a force of best?
That is what we are all hoping for. This is why the first thing we decided to do is to check the laws, do some legal reforms, and we cannot move from where we are to supposedly where we want to be if we don't do anything with the laws. So this is why there is this reform, and I'm sure so many things are brought in, like he mentioned, and then we're expecting that things will move on. But we must start somewhere, and the place we have to start is by reforming the laws, and then we've done that one. So when this one is taken to Parliament at the end of the day, and I'm sure Parliament, they are going to scrutinize it, and if it comes out as a law, then we will now have to operate under the new law, whether it's 2024, whether it's 2025, whether it's 2026. But we are hoping that we get this one done this year or maybe early next year, and then we start moving.
And one important thing again we hope to usher in is lying to the police. Under the ACC Act, if you make a false statement, it's a criminal offense. In court, if you make a false statement, it's perjury. But if you make a false statement to the police, it's no offense for now. So now we're thinking of criminalizing that, because that will enhance the investigation. When you know that you could go to jail for 7 years just by making a false statement, you will want to either avoid being a witness in that particular case or speak the truth. So that is just another area we're thinking of.
But that also has its downside. But at this moment, it's time we...
But it is good, because sometimes somebody can frame you.
You're right.
Yeah, somebody can frame you. And you know, they say, he who alleges must prove.
Right.
And but if you come with a witness to corroborate what somebody else had said, I was there, I saw, understand? And when he was not there, but if there is no way you can check, or maybe if there is no way that person, at the end of the day, to say what you've said to us, based on our investigations, you are lying, and then there is no punishment, somebody else will come and do the same thing.
I remember when even the obnoxious 1965 Public Order Act for us journalists, when it says the truth is not even a defense in the court of law. Yeah. Sometimes people will still have the truth, but because they know that there is a law that even speaks to same, they'll be afraid to come out to even talk.
Yeah.
Still are not even good, because when they are good, say just November, go get problem. That will also deter people from coming forward to serve as witnesses. Yeah. But nonetheless, continue to stay with us.
I was going to ask you, how does the reform speak to the fact that for some of the police officers, they don't even understand some of the laws, They don't understand some of their duties. I'll give you an example. There are times when police officers would argue with drivers about license. You don't have the right to seize my license. No, I have the right to do it. You always find situations sometimes when citizens seem to know a lot more about what the duties are of the police than some of the police officers, especially traffic police officers. How does the reform speak to this?
Well, the reform can only change the laws, but when it comes to practice, we can only hope that the police force, the hierarchy of the police force, will continue. That is why another thing we're advocating for, continuous training of police officers. Because even we as lawyers, like for instance, okay, I'm in the General Legal Council, so I know one thing we're pushing for is for continuous legal education. Before we renew your practicing certificates every year, you must show that you did a particular course or you did something to improve yourself, you know, before your practicing certificates will be renewed. So we're thinking of something again with the police. Every year, the police must go through some continuous legal education to enhance their knowledge, enhance their capability. Because left on its own, there will be a lot of violations of individual rights. But when they know that is why this structure is very important. When they know that they will be held individually, not collectively, you could bring them collectively, but individually liable, then that person will know that his job is on the line. When it happens 1 or 2 times, then you will see people will know that, well, I don't want to lose my job, so let me just act professionally. You see?
I think
another aspect, one last aspect, is when it comes to prosecution. We see the police prosecute right now because we don't have. People say we have a lot of lawyers now. There have been lots of lawyers churned out from the law school. Last year was 300 and something. A couple of months from maybe next month or so, those that passed the bar, 200 and something. You know. But we don't have lawyers who practice in the province. By right, in other countries, the lawyers prosecute. But we don't have enough lawyers to prosecute. So we have to depend on the police who are trained to prosecute. So that is why we're putting it in the act, you know, that the police, because it was unclear in the law, it was unclear. It just said, I think, the power is given to the Inspector General. But now we're putting it in the law that the police officer and investigating police officer can also prosecute the matter in court. So it's clear, you see. There are lots of things which are not in the Police Act, but which are done, that are good things, which we want them to be now in the Police Act, you know.
Well, gentlemen, this is where we would need to round off the conversation, but I know for some of the citizens who like to follow up and participate in such processes, antennas would be up. How is the consultation going to be done to ensure that it reflects the views, opinions, and suggestions of the citizenry?
Well, I must say, we've done the provincial consultations. The Freetown consultations will be held tomorrow. It starts at 9 a.m. At the bank complex. And all those who've already sent out invitations, we expect them to be there. We also expect, I was speaking with somebody from AYV, to cover the program for us, but we'll discuss that later. So it's open to the public. Those who've been invited, we want them to be there. And lastly, I must say, all these efforts, the praises goes to United Nations Development Program. They are the sponsors of this project because we had done a review, but we lacked the finance to do nationwide consultation. They've come to our rescue, and that is why we can take this process forward. So we want to tell the UNDP, thanks a million.
What about the people in the diaspora, the Sierra Leoneans in the diaspora? How do you factor their contribution?
Okay, well, from now till the drafting of the Act, there's our website, www.lawreform.sl, which is our website. The Act is there, the draft report is there, they can download it, and they can also send their views directly. We have our IT officer who keeps us abreast with these views. Thank you.
Thanks for hosting us. We hope to see you tomorrow at Kintom Bank Complex at 9.
Yeah, thank you so very much, gentlemen, for your time this morning in the studios. I think it's been an amazing moment. A lot of messages on our Facebook page. It tells you how interested the people are to see a reform of a force for good. We're excited because we go to bed and wake up without
a service for better.
Good. I am happy that I believe the police is very, very much excited to see a change in that direction. Thank you so very much once again for your time in the studios this morning. And this is where we will end today's edition of the program Wake Up Sierra Leone.